Hello, everyone. As people are coming in, we apologize for the delay. Um, but to make sure that everybody is here in the right place, this is the many shades that racism take in rape. And I am going to be the moderator. I'm Astrid Ferguson. Really quickly, just to let everybody know, please practice self-care. These topics can be difficult to deal with. Um, if anytime you need to take a breather and take a break, please do that. Um, and we'll get started. A little bit about me before I get into everything. I'm Astrid Ferguson, as I said before. I'm a certified life coach. I am a poet and an author as well. And a lot of my writing centers around these things like difficult situations like overcoming rape and the way our culture plays a part in all of this. So I'm excited to get started with all of this. We will have some discussions and then we will open up the chat for Q&A, and we're only here for like a good hour and a half. So I'll make sure that I'll cover as many questions as possible. So just to give you a quick overview of what we'll be discussing, in here, we'll discuss the many ways in which racism plays a role in our experiences with rape, primarily, the BIPOC community, how limiting beliefs, cultural norms keeps us silent or tolerating and feeling ashamed of sharing our stories. We'll provide some concrete and loose ideas in which we can begin healing from the brutal residual effects of rape. So first, I'd like to introduce to you guys Cheyenne Tyler Jacobs. I'll let her do her bio because she's so great and she can talk for herself.
Thank you, Astrid. So hi, everyone. My name is Cheyenne Tyler Jacobs. So most people know me as @SheWillSpeak on Instagram. That is where I started out about 2 years ago, posting my poetry and spoken word videos. And kind of the same as Astrid, I like to talk about a lot of hard topics. I like to ingrain my activism in my poetry. I feel like it's one of the best ways that I have been able to grow as both a writer and as both a community leader. Right now, I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm originally from New Jersey. And one thing about me that I am now happy to be moving into, which is why I came down to Atlanta, is as a writer, I enjoy seeing stories weave and come to life. And I actually want to start manifesting and creating that in films, in TV, starting a novel. And so I'm actually a production assistant for an all Black woman owned screenwriting label, and I'm actually now a writing assistant. And for anyone who knows anything about media, that's really cool to be in a writer's room, as well as a marketing and promotions manager for another production company. And the platform that I run is actually called the She Will Speak series. I don't know what just happened. Okay, is the She Will Speak, yeah, just like cut me out, that's crazy, is the She Will Speak series. And so we are a platform that is women-centered. However, we are open for anyone who is willing to learn, listen, as well as anyone willing to submit their work. So we actually do biannual anthology series, and the first one that we did was centered around gender-based violence. We did one called Dear Sister Friend, which was on empowerment, and the current one that we're doing, which is very timely, is centered around mental health. So that's my bio. That's kind of who I am as a person, and I'm very happy to be having this conversation. Me, Ash, and Patrice actually had this conversation like how long ago? Like a week or two ago. And we are happy that others feel it is a necessary conversation. Well, I don't want to speak to anyone else, but I'm happy that it's a necessary conversation.
Thank you so much, Cheyenne. And our second guest or other person in our panel is Patrice. Hi, Patrice, and I'll let her do her bio.
So, hi everyone. My name is Patrice O'Garo, and you may know me. I'm behind the page and the Instagram page and Facebook page known as Survivors of Color. I like to just consider myself, I'm literally just another survivor who is trying to find my own ways to heal, as well as trying to empower and, support others, in the BIPOC community who are experiencing the same thing. And so I think it's important for us to have, a community of people who, can work together and, find new ways for us to even start healing for those who don't know how. So I think it's pretty exciting to be doing this again with you guys.
Yes, so we're gonna get this conversation started, but before we do, we want to make sure that we say hi to everyone who's joining us. So please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from, and maybe what you're hoping to gain from today's discussion. So yeah, so we have, if I butcher your name, I'm sorry, I don't mean to. Jenna Shika, I'm saying that right, is joining us from San Antonio, Texas. Okay, we have some people, more Californians, more San Antonio, Texas. Jasmine, oh, New York is in the house. We have Delaware, Chicago, Boston. Okay. A lot of people in different places. Mm-hmm. Yes, feel free to join the chat. Nebraska's in here, New Jersey. That's your old hometown, Cheyenne.
Oh. Go ahead, Jersey. I'm from South River.
Oklahoma, Washington, Tacoma, Washington. Yeah, we have a lot of people here. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Please use the chat, converse amongst each other. Even, the questions that we may have, if you want to chime in as well, feel free to use the chat for that as well. We like to, create that engagement. I don't know if you guys set your websites as well, but Patrice and Cheyenne as well, you can feel free to put your information in the chat so that if people want to find out more about you, they can go there as well. So our first question, dun, 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 is for Cheyenne. So Cheyenne, in your own experience, what was harder to grasp? I was raped, I was a victim, or I survived a rape assault, and why?
Well, I definitely would first like to start off with all three are definitely a lot to process, but I feel for myself, I think it would have had to been that I was a victim. And the reason why I would say that is because I feel to be Black American woman here, we have this narrative that, if you're not fast, if you're not this, if you're not that, you should be okay. And, I'm a very big reader. I love reading. And I've been able to read even recently a lot of books that explored, being a Black woman and understanding that a lot of our identity is also unfortunately centered around trying to achieve this level of respect from others around us. We are trying to work within a system that already was set up to think that, we weren't good enough or we deserve what happens to us. So I think, to be a victim felt like, well, but I thought I did everything I was supposed to do. I didn't talk out of term. I didn't go where I wasn't supposed to. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And it was kind of I don't understand why this happened. And I think, to fully process, you were a victim in a country where it was not illegal, to rape Black women. It almost made me seem like, am I a victim or am I just honestly a part of a system that was supposed to work the way it was? Because I feel the more I learn about the roots of, rape and sexual assault, especially for women that look like me, you were just seen as property. You were sexually abused if someone else did something wrong. And it was just a way to be like, okay, well, this person didn't do what they were supposed to do during slavery, so we're going to take you out and rape you in front of everyone just to show that this is what happens if you don't listen. So the idea that I am now a victim, a part of this system that was from the beginning set up to be wrong, it was like, how did I fall in line with this, and why is this happening? And I think it was really hard to process, because when you communicate that with people, it's very much with what did you do? And I think on a very blanketed level, for anyone that is a victim, that's the first thing that I think goes through your head, because that is the first narrative we are given. You know, the first line of questioning that happens to us is, you know, well, where were you? What were you wearing? What happened? Da, 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 da. So it's like, you almost feel like, okay, well, there must have been some actions I had to take to make this happen. And I think I struggled with that a lot. And I think I struggle with it a lot as well, because, and I cannot speak for anyone else's household, but I feel a lot of times within, you know, the BIPOC community, there is a narrative that, because a lot of these things have been seen within generations to generations, where it's just a silence, and not because of silence because it's like we don't care, but a silence like, you know, well, what are we supposed to do about it? And I felt a lot of the people that I thought would have supported me were kind of like, well, this is why you're not supposed to do that, because you end up in situations like this. So to feel that I was a victim, it was just like, no, you know, you put yourself in harm's way. And I think what I'm recognizing even now still in my journey, because as we know, healing is a journey with anything, but especially when it comes to rape and sexual violence, is you will go outside of survivor and victim sometimes. You know, at certain points, I feel like in my mentality, you know, I feel when I read certain things or I'm in a certain space, I'm a victim. But in other times, it's like, well, now I feel like I'm resilient and I'm a survivor. And I think the last point also, you know, with that, we have this view of Black women, you know, and I am happy that people see my work and they see who I am as a person. They're like, oh my gosh, you're light, you're resilient. But I'm also vulnerable. I also can be hurt. It also, you know, I feel pain. So I think to accept that I was a victim would also have to accept that I too can be weak and vulnerable. When I've been really reflecting on a lot of my life, it seems that trauma happens and you just have to pick it up and keep on going. You don't get to be a victim. You know, why are you a victim when we have all these other things that we have to do? So to be able to accept that this thing happened to me and it hurt, I feel like was really to take away, you know, the narrative that even I think was internalizing of what it means to be a Black woman and to feel pain, because we're not. We're just supposed to hold up everybody else, and we're supposed to be the resilient people. So I think being a victim was the hardest thing to process, because everything around me told me that I could never be one.
Thank you for sharing that, Cheyenne. And I truly hear what you're saying. And part of what I'm hearing of what you're saying is that it's not so much just that you're a victim, is that it's one of those abnormal behaviors that we continue to accept in our culture, in our society. And the way that we deal with it is you don't talk about it. You just keep moving. And even if you do talk about it, it just becomes a numbers game. Like, oh yeah, you too. Oh yeah, you too. Instead of, how can we address this issue? How can we, you know, make this point clear that it doesn't matter what anyone did. Rape should never be a consequence to that. It should not be a reaction. Like, that's just not to be tolerated. So if you guys want to chime in on your response to that question as well, please feel free to add in your thoughts in the chat as well, because I know that is a question that for anyone who has dealt with rape, it's a tough one to figure out the different phases of how you deal with each one, or which one was the hardest. So thank you, Cheyenne.
Thank you.
The second question I have for you, Cheyenne, is, I don't know if you've heard of something that's called RTS, which is rape trauma syndrome. It is the psychological term that refers to people who have experienced rape or victims of rape that includes disruptions to normal physical, emotional, cognitive, and interpersonal behavior. This was a theory that was first described by a nurse called Anne Wahlberg Burgess and a sociologist, Linda Light Holmstrom, in 1974. So, based on this, what was your experience with RTS? And how did being a Black woman intensify or reduce those effects?
Well, thank you for that question. And for anyone who does not know, RTS comes in different stages. So it's like you have the acute stage, which normally is the few days to the weeks after, outward adjustment, underground, reorganization, renormalization. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, those are the stages. And I feel like for myself, what I experienced, which is also kind of on the same line, trying to coexist with being a Black woman, was again feeling like you kind of just had to be normal. You had to just kind of jump back in. And I think when we look at RTS and we look at a lot of what we know about sexual assault and we know about rape, I think the way we handle it sometimes when it comes to reporting, when it comes to people, saying, well, let's go to the court, let's go here, I don't think the way we deal with it actually matches what's happening. There was a 2008 study that shows memories of sexual assault are actually one of like the biggest vivid memories people have, even, bigger than car crashes. But the thing is, your peripheral memories are not always there. So what that means is your body remembers how you feel. It's like when you might, smell a certain perfume, cologne, fragrance that someone had on, your body tightens and it shivers because your body is remembering. But you might not have known even what kind of jewelry you wore that day. You might not know what day of the week it was because at that present time, those memories and that system was not operating there. You might remember that it was raining because that might have been what you were focused on. And I think for me, what was the biggest thing that RTS impacted, which again, I don't think helped being a Black woman, was not having the storyline there when somebody asked for it. I'm 25 years old, and my first run-in with just sexual misconduct as a whole, I was in middle school. In middle school, you're from like 12, 13 to like 15 years old. And when I realized when I was like a freshman in college, I just had a memory pop up of that first incident. I was like, I just went through how many years of my life and I blocked this out. And then all of a sudden, years later, it came back. And my job previously, before I moved to Atlanta, I worked with at-risk and homeless youth. And I've had many situations where I, had this shared trauma, or I witnessed things that were very traumatic to me from dealing with some of my clients. And I actually had an incident where I forgot I had a client until I found their paperwork when I left the job, because remembering what had happened was just so much. So I feel when RTS is, you have this hypervigilance. For myself, I had hypervigilance. I have nightmares, still sometimes have nightmares. And yet certain people are like, well, I want this detail, I want that, and you can't give it. It's kind of like, well, we don't believe you. Also feeling like every other concern you have is something else. As we know, when you're Black, and especially if you're just BIPOC in America, the idea that our health is just naturally bad, instead of looking at all the stresses in our life. So people were always focused on, it must be what you're eating, it must be this, it must be that. And then one day I realized it's no, this is trauma. My body is responding to things I do not know. Being able to experience dissociate, I could be by people and then all of a sudden my mind and my body literally detach. It's like I'm not even sitting there. It's like you could touch me, I don't feel anything. But it took me 3 therapists to actually get to a therapist who understood what I was talking about, because for them it was just like, well, maybe, you're just doing this. Maybe it's too much homework. Maybe it's, especially because I was in college, and it's like, no, it's not. And I feel like the self-advocacy I had to have for myself was just, that within itself was just too much to deal with. And I feel like when, you're, again, being Black and dealing with these things, now you're bringing in medical professionals, you're bringing in all these other people, and I'm happy that I had them as resources. But even having them as a resource, I still had to weed out my resources. And I think when it comes to reporting, you know, this is one of the reasons a lot of times we don't report. I mean, again, historically speaking, a lot of people within the BIPOC community do not have a positive relationship with law enforcement and things like that as a whole. We do not we have history that proves we do not have a positive relationship with the medical system as a whole. And then to feel like you need other people's support, it's kind of like, well, where do I go? You know, I wanted to report, but then I felt like, well, who would believe me? I don't know this, I don't know that. I feel like I'm all jumpy. I was being asked too many questions, and I'm happy that I was able to understand myself what RTS is. And I think to understand that, as mentioned before, this unfortunately, and I really do say unfortunately, because especially with what's happening today, I see so many people, you know, we've seen it in the headlines, like, oh my gosh, you're reporting this person who's a perpetrator, they're a rapist, and you're ruining their life. And realistically, it's like, you're ruining mine. Because these phases are ongoing. There's literally, I think the one phase, which is the reorganization is, or I think it's underground, is literally when you're feeling a trigger and then you go over here and you hate everything, you don't understand what's going on, and then you return. And these phases can last years. And so understanding that this is like a lifetime kind of fluid emotion and fluid phases, and understanding that at any different point in these phases, I can need different support, and what does that look like? Because that's another thing too. I feel like we get to move on, even from individuals in our own community, because like you said, Astrid, a lot of it is that silence. It's like, well, you're past this now. And it's like, I'm not past it. And I think the biggest thing that I'm learning, and the biggest thing I would say to anybody is, your body knows. Your body knows. I still deal with my body being tense just because. Like, I could be sitting down at my job and I have to breathe because my body naturally has this tense ever since I went through that. And still kind of understanding where that comes from, still trying to heal that, and still having to advocate for myself at the same time that, yes, I might be able to speak about it. Yes, I might be able to teach a workshop, but that does not mean I don't need support. And I think what we need to do for the BIPOC community, and like I said, I am a Black woman, that is how I identify. We need to allow Black women the space to be not okay, and to be able to go back to being, I need help, because I don't think we do enough of that. I think we feel people are past something and that's just where you stay. And that's not true at all.
I agree with that, Cheyenne. And RTS, to me, if I was to sum it up, it's like grieving.
Mm-hmm.
I think we only think of grieving like when we lose someone, but it's like grieving, like you're grieving the life that you once had before this happened to you. So the first thing is denying that it happened to you, whether it's unconsciously or consciously, because you just don't want to go there again. It's too hard, you know. And then having to relive the details, and you know, explaining what just happened is hard in itself because you're reliving that moment. So, and it can show up in many ways. Like you said, it can show up in our body. It's just like when you have really strong anxiety, which is something that I would do with my own clients, is where do you feel it in your body? Like, pay attention to your body to see where you're feeling this, because your body is telling you we're going through traumatic stress. Mm-hmm. So it's important to you know, be able to listen to that. So thank you so much for sharing that, Cheyenne. And now we're going to move on to Patrice. I am seeing some questions coming in. We're going to answer those after, you know, Patrice shares her experience with us. So Patrice, a couple questions that I had for you. The first one is, in an article by BBC, it stated that meta-analysis found that 60% of victims didn't acknowledge that they had been raped. In your opinion, first, do you agree with this statement? And then second, why do you think this number could be higher or lower in our BIPOC community?
I mean, I guess I can agree with it because I mean, a lot of us don't really acknowledge that we were sexually assaulted or raped. I think in the BIPOC community, we don't have, like Cheyenne said, we don't have that positive relationship with law enforcement, or or even like the medical field. And I think that we in my opinion, the system wasn't created originally created with us in mind. I feel like the system wasn't set up to protect us like it does, for other people. And I think part of it is because we are taught to keep, things to ourselves. Like any sort of bad thing, we're taught to keep it to ourselves. And we aren't. I feel like we aren't encouraged to seek help either. I think that's one of the biggest issues. I mean, like she said, it's already hard enough to acknowledge that something like that has happened to you, and then not knowing where to go another big issue, because we see, like it's like we know where to go, but it's like, is it meant for us to go? Like, is it the right place for us to go? Like, are they going to be there to support us like they would anyone else? And I think that we I think it all has to do with us just not feeling confident enough, or having that right like support system or that encouragement to seek help, or just to acknowledge what we face or what we're facing, and even just not even knowing how to heal, because because we don't acknowledge it. So just not being able to seek the help is a big reason why we can't do it.
I agree. Um, what would you say would be some ways that we could provide that sort of support system, and we could encourage our sisters and brothers?
I mean,
Um,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think it's just doing things, just having just small conversations, like especially if you see someone not feeling like their best, or you can tell something's wrong, but they don't want to share it with you. Just simply providing resources, because I have several people like in my family who I can tell like something's wrong, but they don't want to share, just because we try to keep stuff to ourselves. And like I'll just like send, show them any kind of resources that I know of, or I'll ask someone that I know of any resources, just to just so that they have it, in order to, in case they do decide to seek that kind of help. Or even just on social media, like your regular social media, just post, like I'll randomly post stuff like that, just for those who may need it. So I think it's important to just have those conversations, or just to throw it out there like randomly, just so that they already have it, in case that they end up wanting to use those resources in the future.
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, I think for me, even like when even educating them, like in like right in the moment, like when you're having, like you're overhearing a conversation about sexual assault, or just just things like that in general, just even educating them right in that moment, just so that they're aware of it.
Okay. Thank you, Patrice. Um, I would also add, as a life coach, something I find that helps tremendously, um, as simple as it is just holding space.
Hmm.
Just letting that person just say everything. Don't interrupt, don't suggest, don't educate, don't, just holding space, just acknowledging and validating that person
Hmm.
is does tremendous help for anyone. Like, just to be able to just tell their story and feel like they're not being judged, or they're not being told something else that they should or should not do. Because sometimes people aren't even ready. They aren't even ready. They're just trying to get to the point of acknowledging that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps for anyone out there who may know someone that's struggling and don't really know how to help them. That would be a great way to start. So the second question for you, Patrice, is when you started Survivors of Color, you had posted something interesting that was dealing with consent. You stated that we have normalized the non consensual sex as just another form of sex.
Mm-hmm.
Why and where did we derive this narrative from, in your own opinion?
I feel that way because I mean, if you look at some marriages, it's almost as if, I mean, a lot of times it's the male, but a lot of instances where, it's almost as you automatically owe sex to the person, whether you want to or not. And I think we normalize coercive behavior to the point where we almost expect it. I think, even from like the beginning when we're like toddlers, like we're taught that, we have to hug or kiss someone, despite how uncomfortable we feel with that person. We're taught to do that just to show that you care about that person or just to be nice. And I think even like when we're a little bit older, we're taught that we should feel flattered or feel special if someone pursues us or someone compliments us or someone is trying to, like, I mean, even like sexually harass you. They, it's kind of seen, it's kind of looked at as you should be flattered by it because you're getting attention. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we even see that a lot in like film and like music. Like even like what movie was it? It was The Notebook, like where in the beginning he where Noah had met I think her name was like Allie, like at the amusement park or the carnival, and she was on a date and he was like hanging from the Ferris wheel, and he was holding on to it until she agreed to go on a date with him. Or even like when they actually were on the date and he like laid in the middle of the road and he said he's going to lay there, until a car hits him, until she basically decides to actually date him. And I feel like with that, she only originally started dating him because he basically was, not forcing her to, but trying to, coerce her into dating him. And I think for those who don't know what like coercion is, or specifically sexual coercion, it's any unwanted sexual activity that happens when you are pressured, tricked, um, threatened, or forced into in a non-physical way. And I think like even just like examples of coercion is like when the person is like continuing to pressure you and until you say no, or even after you say no they continue to ask you over and over again. And another one is like when they react in a negative way or act sad, or they resent you, basically saying like, well, you're my boyfriend, you're my girlfriend, you're supposed to do this for me, if you love me you'll do this for me. Or even like they'll even try to provide you with like, either drugs or alcohol just to like, like loosen you up or to get you to change your mind. And even like they'll even there's another example is them making you feel threatened or afraid, you know, afraid of what making you feel threatened or afraid of what may happen to you if you do refuse. And I think another way to say, if I can't get it from you, well, I'll get it from somebody else. And I think overall it's them making you feel like you owe them, because you're in a relationship and because you've had sex with them before, and because they spent money on you or bought you a gift, or because you went home with them to begin with. And I think that we how do I say it? I think that we have to find ways to not make that like a normal thing, because I think that a lot of people don't think that as like something that's negative. They think that it's the normal part of a relationship, to where because you're married, or just because you're in any kind of relationship, that just comes with it. That that's supposedly your body belongs to them, their body belongs to you, and you're basically supposed to give them what they want, no matter if you're in the mood or not. And I think it's important to try to change that narrative, because it's not, it's not a good feeling to experience something like that. I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think most of us have experienced something like that in one relationship or another. And I think it's something that it definitely needs to change.
If I, oh, I don't know if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
I definitely agree, Patrice. Especially when you pinpointed like consensual partnerships, because I think, especially with what I'm seeing now, we know, and I think it is taught a lot. You know, we know the statistics: 1 in 4, 1 in 7. A lot of people, you're taught these things in schools where you can just, you know, recite it back as if it was just okay, yeah. But I think when you actually look at the fact that, you know, over 85% of sexual violence comes from someone that you know. I think also why it seems so normalized is because the way that we go about assisting, reporting, and or giving, you know, this aid to, it's not reflecting, I think, a lot of what, it's not reflecting the diversity of what sexual violence is. Because, you know, a lot of even thinking of it as simple as I'm looking at, you know, the reporting, like if you're getting questions on what happened, a lot of those questions don't reflect being in a relationship with someone. A lot of those questions make it sound like, you know, I met somebody when I went to the bar and they drugged me, and it's like, okay, well, what happened? A lot of those questions don't reflect, I've been dating this person for 2 years and they did this. It's kind of like you said, well, you know, well, it happened last week. Did you maybe tell them? Is it this? And it's like, no. And I think a lot of times when you're in these confinements of these relationships, I think it is a big thing of that internalized, well, what exactly happened? I know in my experience with supporting a lot of the young people that I worked with, where I think not even I think, it is a lot of time and a lot of healing to even admit that something happened, because when they were in the confinements of relationship, they could not process that happened. You know, they wouldn't say it was rape. They wouldn't say it was sexual assault. I've had some of my youth give me the stories back to them, and I knew what happened. I'm listening to the story like, okay, this does not really sound like this was consensual to me, but what do you think? And I think, to your point, Astrid, it's giving space, and it's also validation. Because again, the body knows. A lot of the young people, at least the young people I worked with, they felt somewhere that it was not right. But I feel like when they would go to people, they would say, no, that's okay. Like, you were dating, so it's fine. Or it's like, why are you mad? Like, you should be happy that this happened, you know? And so your mindset is like, okay, I should be happy this has happened. This is okay that this happened. I should not complain that it's happened. Until you, to your point, Patrice, you know, get to a resource that says, no, actually, this was not okay. And I don't know, again, what everyone even listening, what if you read, what you watch, but I know personally, I'm watching the I May Destroy You. And the one thing I love that I feel like was done with this show is the different variation of how sexual assault happens. And because I think we really need to talk about it. And I think even on social media right now, and I'm happy to see people using social media as a public platform to be able to give this information. And I'm seeing a lot of conversation, you know, when people sometimes get pushback, like, I don't understand why this person would disagree. And to your point, Astrid, it's hard to maybe 3 years later hear somebody else's story and see that they were raped, and that might mean that you were too. And I think we also need to understand that this is a process. You know, a lot of people, you know, this has happened across generations. So you might be working with people who maybe they're giving pushback because accepting that you were assaulted means that they were assaulted too. And they're trying to understand how exactly that happened. And that's not excusing, you know, people maybe not agreeing or maybe trying to question, but something that I personally have been reflecting on and noticing, because again, I experienced it, where I'm like, oh no, like that I don't think that falls into that gray area, that line, until I realized it did. And that gray area means I was in that situation too. So I think we try to categorize, you know, these acts of rape as sex, because I think for the perpetrator, it makes it a comfortable, no, it's okay. And I think, to your point, it's a natural reaction to want to minimize and want to forget a traumatic event that happened to you. And if your body and your mind is able to do it, you will. Because I was even just still reflecting on your question prior. And one thing I personally went through was, you know, using substances, because I could not be close to people without being altered. because all it was traumatic and triggering events. So I definitely think when you look at these situations that are obviously rape and why is it normalized, I feel like, you know, on the rapist side, it's seen as like, okay, well, it's so much gray area that you don't know. And as the victim, it's kind of having to admit that this happened. But maybe if you can try to convince yourself that it didn't, it means that you weren't a victim. And I think the biggest thing, I know I'm looking at the chat as well, is yes, mental health plays a big part of this, which is why these conversations are needed. Because again, I think the conversations are happening and I think they're there, but I think the services a lot of times that are being provided don't match the conversations. Like if we know these are the conversations, if we know a lot of these things happen within the confinements of relationships or happen with people that you know, because it might not be a relationship. It could be, you know, your older brother's best friend that you know since you were 5. So they're like family to you. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that family dynamic now? We need those resources to match the conversations.
Right. And someone did say in the chat, Tia Willis Manning, she said she's a licensed therapist in Nebraska and a survivor. And she says, in regards to providing therapy, we are taught to help folks work through trauma, but rarely discuss sexual health. So I have made it part of my therapy practice to make sure that I discuss sexual health, and never ceases to amaze me how many folks don't know about sexual health. I've had to do several adjustments to make inclusive sex education because diagrams and overall images do not resemble BIPOC. And that is true. I don't think we realize what our sexual health is, what different, sex drives we might have, what turns us on, what turns us off. And I think the most crucial part is being able to voice, like, this doesn't work for me, and not feeling ashamed or feeling like you're less of a partner or you can't please your partner, and thinking that you have to become numb and just take it, because you're in a relationship or this person or whatever story it is that's coming up in your head, really quickly to share. I feel like this is something that happens a lot, especially, and maybe you guys agree or disagree, but as a mom, especially when you're in relationships, when you're a mom, your body may change after having a child, and you're feeling extremely pressured to please your significant other, even though you're not in it. And they know you're not in it. And it's just like, it becomes like a forced expectation. And that's difficult to admit a lot of times. And it's difficult to have those conversations, especially if you're in a relationship with someone you really do love, and it's affecting how you're seeing that person. So I don't know if you guys agree with this, but I mean, I'm a mom, I have 2 kids. And I can tell you, after you've had children, your body does change. It does react differently. It might take you a while for you to find yourself again. And sometimes the relationship dynamics change, and that can affect, consensual and non-consensual sex. So I think that's important to talk about as well.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with what someone put in the chat, like, we don't know the definition of consent. I totally 100% agree with that. And I remember when I think it was a few years ago when I really learned what coercion was. And I think a lot of people don't understand how that is a part of sexual assault and violence, and I even had to explain it to some of my friends, like, if you're, as you said, Patrice, if you're asking someone over and over, if you're not letting them leave, if you're guilt tripping them, if you're doing any of those things and they say yes, they did not consent because they wanted to, they consented because it's been 30 minutes and you're standing by the door.
Mm-hmm.
So
over with.
You know, so that's not consensual sex. That honestly, I like it's forced, it's coerced. And I think that, you know, and I was speaking to one of my friends even the other day about this. They were speaking about grooming, and they're like, I just don't understand. I don't understand this. I think this is where, to everyone's point, we need more diversity in these conversations. We need more very segmented conversations, because I think that there are so many forms, so many barriers, so many things at play, that I think this one way of reporting, this one way of giving mental health, it's not helping. And I say it's not helping because, like, I can speak for myself. I feel like so many ways I've been cut out. You know, so many times, like you said, you know, if you know the person, it's kind of like, well, you knew them, so what did you do? And when you look at the fact that when you are a woman with brown skin, when you are a BIPOC woman, it's or a BIPOC person as a whole, it's almost like no one believes me. You know, like I said, as a Black woman, I felt that no one would believe a word that I said, and I felt like my healing was on me. And I also feel, to your point, Astrid, that we are taught, even from a young age, just due to the systematic oppression that we have, how to operate in these relationships. And, you know, being a Black woman, I feel a lot of my narrative was, you know, expect these things because that's just what happens. That's just how people treat you. And I don't know about anybody else, but why are we teaching our young people, you know, instead of teaching them body positivity, instead of them teaching safety, instead of them teaching self-advocacy and how to tell us if something happens to them, we pass down this tradition of, well, this is just how people treat you because you look the way you do, and you might just have to deal with it. And when I finally realized that was the narrative I was being taught, that's not okay anymore for me. And I've had to do a lot of unlearning, you know, to understand that that was the generational trauma just trickling down. So also for anybody, you know, who's watching, that is one thing you might be doing, I think, in your personal life. And I know I saw a few questions of, I believe, advocates and people who work in the field, like how do you have these conversations? I actually wrote a piece for the Army of Survivors that we have to understand that trauma is not linear, and that, like, you might meet someone at this age, but there is all this generational thing that they're seeing. And that understanding that the reason why they might not report, even though in your head it's like, well, why? This is a viable option. Like we all, I think what we, you know, at least on the panel can agree to, it was generationally passed down. That's just not something that you do. So you're not only undoing this traumatic incident, you're talking to how many years of a passed down narrative. You know, like I said, even in my first question, it wasn't seen as a problem to rape a Black woman. So when you're dealing with some of these systems, the courts, they're a court that came out of a place where Black women's bodies were property. They were used as punishment. They were used as entertaining. We were used to just produce. So this ingrained system, it's not just turning down or trying to advocate for this one case. It's advocating for everything. And I think when we had this panel before, the way I said it was, you know, we're not trying to change narratives, we're trying to create them. You know, I can't change a narrative that a Black woman's body matters if, when I look at my history books, nowhere from the day, you know, my ancestors touched this land, they mattered, because they did not. So I have to create this narrative, and then we have to make resources that mirror that, which is why this is so hard, because I think we are still in this mindset like we need change. No, we actually need to, we're creating. Change means, like, I think I use the example of a vase. If I break a vase and I glue it back together, the vase is already shaped like a certain way. I could just follow the pattern. If we're, you know, seeing that none of these systems were in place, we're not changing it. We have to create it. We have to create it. So I also want to give room for, if anyone is feeling this is very difficult, it probably most likely is, because we're doing something that was not here. But I think it's great that even us on this panel are having this conversation, because I mean, I can only speak for my parents. This was not the narrative that they had.
Yeah. And, you know, I agree. I mean, we've passed down trauma for a very long time. And I want to make sure that anyone here knows, you know, you are beautiful. Your body belongs to you. And no matter what happened or how you dress or how you behave, that's another narrative that we pass down too. You don't deserve anyone to inflict any kind of damage on you, not just physical, not just, sexual, any kind of damage. It's not to be tolerated. And we are all beautiful in our own ways, and we deserve to be respected. Period. That shouldn't even be, that's not even up for discussion at this point. Thank you so much, Patrice, for that. I want to make sure that I ask some of these questions. Somebody submitted, privately, anonymously. You can do that as well if you don't want your name, said. And this person asked, how can you do healing work not only to one's survivorship, but if your attacker was a particular race, and while I'm in everyday life, I'm fine, but if I see someone who looks similar, I have a PTSD reaction.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that? That every time that you see someone that may look similar in your regular life, that you may have post-traumatic stress reaction to it?
I usually try to look away from that person, or I'm always trying to like give myself a pep talk in my head, because the person who did rape me, he's Caucasian, so it's like, and he's Caucasian, he's skinny, and he's bald. So whenever I see someone who looks like that, I try to hurry up and like just remove myself from that area and try to talk myself, try to give myself, positive affirmations, and try to remind myself, like, this isn't the person, like, you're okay, and just, try to give myself some positivity just to try to relax and, in a way move forward.
I think for me, and I was sexually assaulted by two different people at two different points in my life. And actually the person that I'm dating now is the same race as one person. And I think what has helped me in this again is a little different, because this is now in the confinements of a relationship, is having the space to be able to communicate that. Like, there was one day, like, I just had to tell him, like, you remind me of this person because you said this. And he didn't say anything bad. It just was like, it was a dark room and we were watching a movie, and it's, that PTSD kicked in, and it was just like, I just got very scared. I think when it comes to how you heal from that, it's first, which is the understanding that this is real. It's understanding that you're feeling these emotions. And now that you're acknowledging that, I think it's, it's a process. And I wish I could tell you how long it takes. I can't, because, this is now years later and this new emotion popped up. But kind of what Patrice said, whatever techniques work for you. So whether that's breathing, whether that's talking it through, whether that's, I don't know what kind of resources that you have, but trying to maybe talk about the root of, the assault, to where over time, the more you are able to kind of heal from that, the more the PTSD will lower. That's what I found. A lot of times now it's more like triggers, or it's more, I can, we're in 2020 right now. There's been a whole lot of changes personally that have happened in my life, from people's deaths in my family, to where my stress level is at a high right now. So a lot of people who know me, like Ashley is someone who knows me, like everything else in my life has risen, like things that normally I've been able to heal from. It's kind of like they also just kind of came back up. So I also want to give you space for that as well, that if it does come back up, don't think you're not doing the work. Like, don't think like, dang, like I went outside and this bothered me. Unfortunately, it's going to happen. Again, our minds and bodies, sometimes they feel things that we do not. But if you're able to have these resources, if you're able to talk this out, and if you're able, again, to give you the grace where if you have these feelings, whether that's breathing, whether that's taking a moment back, that it's okay to not be okay. Because one thing, and then like, this is then the answer to my question, I think one thing that would sometimes get me down is I would feel, you know, anxious, or I'd be afraid, I'd be sad, but then I'd be upset that I felt those things. So I intensified it because now I'm like, dang, Cheyenne, why can't we get past that? And that's not, you know, as someone who's gone through it, that's not the reaction that you want. You want to give yourself grace to understand this is a healing process.
Yes. Thank you so much for those answers. And also, you know, having those bite-sized goals, like maybe today, you know, you're going to deal with, you know, was it a smell? Was it the plate? Was it, you know, small increments of how you want to push forward from it? And just being patient, you know, it takes time. There's no real set time for healing. Just being patient with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The next question was from Kimberly Schrader, who says, I'm wondering if you can talk about ways in which people who may be on the receiving end of a report, if a victim wanted to report and made that decision, can help reduce these barriers and make reporting even for supportive measures more accessible to more people. I think on the receiving end, the first thing is acknowledging that it's difficult for this person. Like, this just happened to this person, and to expect this person to just jump right in and tell their story is almost an unfeasible expectation because you're in a state of shock. So the first thing I would say, I mean, from my own practice, is to empathize and sympathize with the person and getting them to, you know, calm down and acknowledge, like, okay, like, this happened. Now, I would like to help you. You know, how can I help you? And allow them to tell their stories. Because I think it's when in the midst of it all happening and the questions just come, well, what did he look like? What is this? What is it? You're still processing what happened. And it's difficult to really get the story out. So I would always say, like, get the person to come out of shock first, you know, make them feel like they're safe and that something is going to be done about the situation. Maybe even call someone who that they trust to hold them while they're talking. Because sometimes, you don't know how much a hug or holding a hand can do for someone, just to get them to come down to reality. That's what I would say. I don't know what you guys would suggest.
I would definitely, you know, and I know Patrice mentioned it earlier, is having the resources prior. So it's like, you know, if you're someone who works on a university, or you're someone who, you know, is in a nonprofit, like, seeing what's in the community. I think a lot of times we don't even know what's in our own backyards. We don't even know what support groups, what services, what materials to read are, like, literally sitting, you know, 2 miles from us. And I think when you have that on hand, to Astrid's point, it kind of eases where it seems like, you know, I'm not here searching for things. Like, it's kind of like, you know, if I enter in, which I've experienced, which, you know, when I worked with youth, I hated when they would have these experiences. Like, as soon as you walk in and the person already looks like they don't even have a resource for you, you subconsciously are like, okay, you can't help me. Like, and it's very quickly, those decisions are subconsciously made. So I think, to Astrid's point, being able to validate them. I'm a big person on this: guide, not lead. I think too many times, you know, we have our vision of what we would want, or what we think, you know, is a better option. And to understand that, and I think the question went through here, like, what happens if someone, like, I don't know how it was written, but it's kind of like if they see another way of reporting. I personally have seen people in schools who, you know, don't want to report where they want the person arrested. They just want the person removed from this activity. And at the end of the day, if that's what that person wants, then that's what that person wants. And we're supposed to advocate for what they want. And I think understanding that if you're not the person to be able to help, then that's okay too. Understanding that, you know what, I might not have the resources that you need, but guess what? Because you came into my office, I'm a phone call away. You can come back and if you want to talk, but I think maybe this person is more equipped to help. Because I think sometimes, you know, which is great that we want to help so much, and I think sometimes we are really invested, but if you really are not the right person, then that's okay. I know, and I use this all the time, like, you know, when I worked with clients, I had a lot of young people who their first language, they had a different first language. Three of them, their first language is in Spanish. So when things would happen, they would speak Spanish because that is the way it naturally came out. That was the emotion. That was the first emotion they felt. So I understood that when incidents would happen, I was not the person that they needed to talk to because unfortunately I could not process with them. I might know secondary, I could have an update and we can work from there. But understanding, like, you know what, you might need or a different resource, someone who is equipped. And I think even that language, a lot of times we look at it like, I can't help, instead of being like, you know what, I have a resource that can fully give you what you need. And I think sometimes that is just as empowering because it shows that you understand, maybe I need to step out of the way for you to fully get the healing and the resources that you need. And like I said, I've done it many a times. So that's a big thing I would also advise too. Because again, depending on the area or what the person needs, you might not have that. So.
Yeah, and thank you to those who have, you know, submitted their questions and their stories. These are tough things, and, you know, being vulnerable can be hard, but it's very brave as well. And also to remember that you can report anonymously. We have shared some things in the chat. Shout out to Kenora for holding us down. um, there is always, you know, all kinds of resources out there, but please take time first with yourself. You know, you need to be ready. You need to be open to have that discussion. Because if you're feeling pressured or you're feeling like you're not ready to take, it's, you know, it's gonna hurt you even more in the end, and you won't be able to move forward. So take as much time as you need to process and to figure out how you want to move forward, and don't really set like that like, because we're very hard on ourselves. I know I can be, that we put these unfeasible expectations. We think like tomorrow we're just gonna snap out of it, and it doesn't happen that way. It's slow steps, right? And I mean, especially for our BIPOC community, I mean, you see our history, everything that we've gone through in our history. It's going to take even longer to overcome all of those things. I don't think we have any other questions. Do you guys have any questions for me? Cheyenne or Patrice?
Well, I didn't, honestly, I was waiting for the distinction between the chat and or us.
I have like a random question. I think like regarding consent, like when do you, like in your opinions, like when do you think is like as far as like school ages, like when do you think is the earliest time to even start discussing consent, or do you think it's something that needs to be provided in the schools? Like how early do you think that should be?
Question.
Honestly, as soon as you're teaching them their body parts.
Mm-hmm.
I teach my children, you know, that's your pee-pee. Nobody touches your pee-pee. You know, I mean, I have boys. For girls, you know, it's very important to teach them early. I mean, people are changing their diapers and stuff. And, you know, another thing we didn't touch on is fondling.
Mm-hmm.
And how that can lead to coercion or even rape. You know, we know it happens even in family. There's incest. I mean, there's an abundance amount of topics that can be touched on this, but I think as soon as children are starting to talk and they're starting to learn their body parts, it's very important to teach them. I mean, you don't have to say, you know, the whole thing, but you have to say, like, this is your private area. If anybody touches your private area or it feels weird, tell mommy or tell daddy. You know, I tell my little one, nobody touches your pee. You know, I explain what I'm doing to my little, we're gonna clean your pee, you know, like things like that.
Actually, with my 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I would say as early as possible, just like how we have to have the conversation about race with our children because it comes up very early, sometimes as early as 3. We should be having that conversation as early as possible as well.
I think that's a very good question too, because I just had to, I just actually gave that resource to a friend. I think when I was, I'm trying to think what they called it. I think it was like the good touch, bad touch. We would teach them when they were in daycare. And like you said, a lot of times it's just even the conversation of like, no one touches you here. And if you do, tell me. And I think a lot of the times, like, it's really important that we narrate it just like that, like, you can tell me, because I think one of the biggest things, and actually Kenora, because I saw this question, I was like, ooh, that's me right now, I'm put in the chat, is understanding that you should not feel shameful because you didn't do anything. And I think, which I'm happy that y'all both are doing that, because I think, you know, for myself personally, it was not developed for me to have that communication with my parents. And I feel like for a lot of the BIPOC community, it's very much like, you know, do as I say, not what I do. You know, this is a dictate. Like, I literally heard in my house, this is a dictatorship, not a democracy. So it's like, okay, you know, yes, we don't ask questions. We don't say anything. If you say anything, I was even reading a post, I think it was on Conscious Kid, where sometimes even as parents, the first thing, you know, we mistakenly do is like, well, what did you do? Instead of being like, hey, you know, if this happens, come back to me. And I know Kenora, I think it's our, yes, you said, can you speak to finding one's way back to intimacy and reconnecting with yourself? So for myself personally, because I think I'm now with that stage, like I said, I very much experienced the dissociations, like to the point where honestly, like, I couldn't be sober with someone that I cared about, because I would just be laying there and it would just be like, no, okay. Or we could just be out and it was like all of a sudden my mind would just remind me like this, you know, you were sexually assaulted, and be like, I would like to go home now. And I think a lot of it comes from, for me personally, doing the space to understand that this was not my fault, and to really, I think, understand that this person was a horrible person. What they did was horrible and I did not deserve it. But, and I post this a lot on my page, love should never hurt you. It shouldn't have hurt you before, during, or after. And I think when I was able to personally separate, you know, sexual violence with this is how people love, I was able to give myself the grace to, number one, start loving myself again. Because like Astrid, you said, it's very important to understand that your body is yours and you're beautiful, because there'd be points when I like look at myself and I'd be like, you're ugly, horrible person. Like, how could this happen to you? And we project that on people. We'll project our views on ourselves onto others, and we'll have these walls. And I would even go as far as intimate relationships outside of my partnerships. Like, I started having bad relationship with my friends because I didn't understand how they could be friends with me, because how did I let this happen? And I believe that if you want to start, you know, having these intimate relationships with a partner, is having those conversations, like, you know, with the person I'm with right now, I'm very open about like, listen, and being able to disclose as it's comfortable, you know, this is what happened to me and these are my boundaries. This is what I need to happen. This is the conversation. Like, you know, this makes me uncomfortable. And really, and it's hard having that trust. But I feel like when you are able to even communicate that, I think that's a win right there, because there was a time where I honestly felt so silent because I was just so used to this happening that it would just, you know, I would just, you know, whatever happened. And now I'm just, you know, very much self-advocating, like, listen, like, this is my boundaries, this is this. And I think the biggest thing is understanding that it is okay not to be ready to be in an intimate relationship, and understanding that maybe the best intimate relationship you have, and I know sometimes it's cliche, but really is with yourself, you know, because we sometimes have there's a wide range of being self-destructive to yourself. And for me, I can speak on a lot of the ways I was self-destructive to myself was having poor relationships. Like I could take a happy friendship, a happy relationship, a family relationship, and I just could not accept the love because of what happened. And again, it comes with time. I'm still learning. I'm still very actively having these conversations, but I definitely think it's a journey in itself, and it's okay. I actually am a writer for the Black Love page, and if you go on there, I wrote a piece, and it was more so, no, it was on sexual violence and domestic violence, and it was like how to start dating again. Like, what does that look like? And a big thing again is boundaries. Like one thing for me, I don't let people know where I live. If you're picking me up from a date, we're meeting at a mutual spot. I don't. Oh, I can't. No, I don't. And to understand, to your point, and then I'll like end with this, is like, your being is love, and it's hard. It really is hard to love ourselves, but love yourself to know the boundaries that you have are necessary and they're valid. You don't have to explain them. Why can't I come to your house? Because you can't know where I live. That's just it. You can't do this, you can't do that. And that's fine. And just, again, to just be able to stand firm in your decisions, because you know, at the end of the day, it's going to protect you and it's going to make you feel comfortable.
Yes. Thank you, Cheyenne. And you are beautiful, and you are the bomb. Right. And, you know, I'm glad that you overcame that whole sabotaging and all of that, because it's a traumatic response. So I'm glad to see you grow. I mean, I know Cheyenne personally, so I can say this, that she has grown tremendously from the time that I knew her. So I'm so happy to see you shining. But I will say, you know, premises of time, my story is a little different. My story, I am both Haitian and Dominican. And when I came to this country, my parents divorced. My father was 33 years older than my mom. He passed away. Now, she was older. You could say that I was like cradle robbing, but back then, another thing that was used was if you wanted to come to the United States, you would get married off, and you would be responsible for the rest of your family to come. Now, my mom made that decision. It wasn't like it was forced on her, but granted, 33 years, that's too much of a big difference. So she went off, she went with my stepfather. My stepfather used the topic of when you first get your period to teach me about sex. And that's where the molestation began. My mother never talked to me about my body as a woman. My mother never talked to me about consent. As a matter of fact, I would hear my mother continuously be raped by my stepfather. And that sent the message to me that if she's not saying something and she's not standing up for herself, why should I? And this is something that happens a lot in the Latinx community, because not only do we have to deal with, you know, what's going on in our household, but there's also that heavy responsibility that lands on us, that if we say something, let's say that person or somebody in your house is here illegally, or that means that your family, you know, whatever is going on for them to come to the United States and become US citizens, that might be affected. Or it could be the whole thing that your family completely disowns you because you have decided to stand up for yourself. there's a lot of that happens within our community. And I'm here to say that all of it is bullshit. It doesn't matter the situation. You didn't deserve it. It's not okay. Nothing should justify you tolerating this to happen over and over. And it happens a lot, especially in domestic abusive relationships. My stepfather was very abusive towards my mother. He was abusive towards me. And that really hindered me of having any kind of relationship. I flew under the radar because I was very quiet. A lot of people feel like the only students that you should be paying attention to are those students that lash out, when in reality, the passive students are just in as much trouble as those who are lashing out. I was passive. I got great grades. If anything, nobody paid attention because I was in every after school program just so I would avoid going home. I would do anything just to avoid going home to the chaos that I was growing up in. Now, that's why when I write about these things, is more of a personal experience, because it took me a very, very long time to get to a place where I could stand up for myself, where I could tell others that standing up for yourself is not a sin. Standing up for yourself is not that you're trying to, form conflict. Standing up for yourself is not like you're a combative person. Standing up for yourself is simply means you value who you are, you value your life, and you deserve to live the life that you want, no matter what that looks like, So that's why I'm like, if I have any, Latinx people listening, I know how it is for our culture, and I know how difficult it is because of all of the other situations that we might be dealing with. We are taught to endure before we actually take action. And that is something that we should change. So I hope, with me sharing my own story, that helps anyone who might be listening who may have dealt with the same thing and probably don't even know how to put it into words, or saying maybe my story is not as important because I wasn't like penetrated, or I wasn't, no, your story matters just as much. So I don't know how much time we have left, but do you guys have anything else that you would like to add to this conversation?
I don't believe so. I'm happy that folks feel that they definitely got a lot out of this. And if anyone needs, I can drop my email if you have any questions that were not answered or questions that you want to ask off to the side. But yes, I'm happy that we are creating space for these conversations. Thank you to End Rape on Campus and It's On Us for inviting us to come speak. These are never easy topics, but I personally feel a sense of hope when I hear that people want to hear, what I have to say, or they, read my work and they feel something from it because they feel like it's being talked about. Recently, I posted something about mental health, and just the picture and my own story and my own relationship with depression and suicidal ideations, and the feedback I got back I didn't really expect. And my tweet after was honestly like, being a Black woman, I've never, as I reflect as a Black child, I never heard anyone tell me it's okay not to be okay. Never heard anyone tell me, go ahead and do this. My collection of poetry book is The Child Type of Beautiful, and one of my personal favorites, and that's why I have it everywhere, is a poem that I have in there is Tired of Young Black Girls and Boys Facing Social Rejection because Anxiety and Depression is Diagnosed by Skin Complexion. And I feel like a lot of these topics, a lot of these issues, a lot of the resources that we have are diagnosed by your skin complexion. And it's definitely a lot. And I give space to anyone who says a lot, because trust me, as awesome, I'm able to look at my phone at people like, oh, I get to hear Cheyenne speak and I love it. And I really do appreciate it. But trust me, Astrid knows, like Kenora knows as well. Patrice, I'm sure you've seen it even in the chat and like on my pages. Like there have been plenty of nights I've cried because I know the reason I get treated the way I do is because my skin is the color that it is. And that's really hard, you know, sometimes to process. And I acknowledge that it is hard to have these conversations and know that because I am a Black woman, I get treated the way I get treated, and to be very conscious of that. And that doesn't mean the weight is less heavy because I get it. I feel like sometimes it's just like, I think I called Ashley the other day, like, dang, like, just because I'm Black, like, that's how we feel. But I have hope that there's so much support going on right now. There's so many people actively trying. And yes, we're getting pushback, but I do think this platform, because honestly, I might not see it in my generation, but I do hope that one day when I have children or my children's children, they'll be able to pull up these conversations and know we were doing this, so we don't have people who wake up and cry because they don't understand why a system hates them just because of the way they look.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And mine, I wrote it in the Serpent's Rattle. That's where I let loose. That was where the first time where I said from beginning to end, you just got to find your way of telling your story. And Patrice, thank you so much too. All of your insight and for providing survivors of color online as well. I don't know if you shared your websites, but I'm on AshtonFerguson.com. I do have some changes coming to my website, so it will probably look very different. But Patrice and Cheyenne, thank you so much. And I don't know if you want to share more things of how people can find you, but yeah.
I just want to say, you know, how much I appreciate being invited to do this, because for me, I'm known to be quiet. I'm introverted, so I'm used to being like the listener. So just like the sound of my voice, I'm not used to that, because I'm used to just like not having a voice or not feeling like what I have to say matters. So like in a way, this is overwhelming for me because I'm just not used to it. And I think it feels great to know that there are people who actually care about what I have to say. And I think I just wanted to say, you know, I just appreciate it, because it's a big thing for me to do this, because I'm just used to not even like expressing how I feel aloud without, and people, and not worrying about how people are going to perceive it or how they're them judging it. So I just appreciate to be invited to be doing this.
Your voice is powerful, and one thing I've realized, and you know, I have TikTok. I don't be using TikTok like that though, but I appreciate other people's TikToks. Y'all should follow Ashley on TikTok. She had me laughing. One thing I saw, Patrice, and it's helped me a lot. It really did. Like just this week was it's like you were never ugly, you were never voiceless, you were never all these things. Mm-hmm. You just grew up in a system that had too many biases.
Yeah.
And I can honestly tell you, like, you know, something as simple as me moving from a predominantly white neighborhood in New Jersey to Atlanta, Georgia, the love that I have for myself, I haven't felt. Like, I'm 25, and I can tell you, like, again, in these last few months, the love that I've had for myself is different because I see myself in other things. It being on social media, seeing pages like Survivors of Colors, seeing pages like End Rape on Campus, and It's on Us, see people who not only look like me, but who are not afraid to share narratives, even people who don't look like me, which I think is also very important. Having allies who are not afraid to be like, you need to be quiet because she was talking, you know, I feel like it gives you power because it's like I was never the problem. So I also want to, you know, if that encourages you as well, is like, and anyone who's listening, that it was never you. It was never your identity was never the problem. You were just around people who were homophobic. Your skin color was never the problem. You were just around people who were racist. You know, our identities were never the issue. And I think that being able to be in spaces, and that's why I'm a big believer, find those circles that support you, you know, because again, like I found everybody here that were on this panel, we all met through social media. I found gems. I was one lucky. I'll admit I was a lucky one. I found some rocks and we tossed them back, but I found some gems too. Tossed the rocks back, kept the gems. And Patrice is like, I picked up rocks.
Exactly.
I too. So I do encourage everybody, you know, to realize that it's hard to accept that there's good in you, but honestly, a lot of it might just be like, again, like I never thought my hair was nice until I moved. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh snap, this fro is everything in a bag of chips. Look how it sit on my head. But when I was growing up in a predominantly white neighborhood in suburbia, I was like, Mom, why did I come out like this? So I just wanted to give you that because I want to see you on even more panels, okay? Videos on Survivor.
I'm forcing myself to do it.
No.
Like, I was like, I need to be more outgoing, more, you know, to express myself more. And this is like, doing this is kind of forcing me to do that. So.
Listen, we're going to do something real quick, Patrice, because we need to see more of you. Your voice matters. You are beautiful. You have a lot to share. You have great insight. So instead of you saying forcing yourself, what's a different way that you can say that?
I'm encouraging myself to do
there
it.
We go.
You knew that was the right answer too. Before she's.
Yeah, I knew.
Encouraging yourself.
That was with your chest. I felt that.
Right.
Definitely.
It's a different way to say, you know, I'm pushing myself to do this.
Yes, Astrid is a life coach, y'all.
Yeah.
And just like 2 seconds, only because we mentioned it. This is Astrid's. Ignore the finger stains. I'll be picking this up a lot. And then this is mine. So if you are interested in poetry, and I know I can speak specifically for Astrid, her book contains a lot of what we were talking about today. So that is like, you know, if you really want to get into like that mindset and that conversation, I definitely would read this as well. And that's The Serpent Rattle, and that's The Trap Detective Beautiful. And again, we should do this again. We should do it for a third time. What y'all say?
Yeah.
Find another platform to.
Yeah, they're all available on Amazon, y'all. Amazon, our websites, but Amazon is probably your surest bet. But yes, Patrice, please do the reframing of the mind. You are encouraging yourself to be here. You are showing up for all of those who can't show up for themselves. You know, it's not that you are you're inverted or introverted. It's that you think through things. You like to process things before you say them because you want to make sure that you're acknowledging those around you. Okay, don't use that as like, oh, it's a negative thing. No. And you might be, you know, you may not like the sound of your voice, but guess what? We do.
That's true.
Okay. So
I'm working on that. I really am. I'm working on it.
I feel you should just book one of Astrid's consultings. I'm gonna reframe this convo. And for anyone watching, this is like a actual in real time. She has, I think, consultations on there. But no, I'm very happy to have this conversation. And like I said, I'm very it always refreshes me to see that we're doing the work. So, and like again, and thank you again, because you here, Kenyora, for inviting us.
Yes.
She doing the work over here with these links. Like Astrid, you said every time you said something, a link just popped down. Like
gotta be there for my
so thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, we apologize that we started just a tad bit late, but thank you so much. I hope that we have helped many out there. Thank you for being active in the chat. Feel free to reach us outside of this. And yeah, maybe we'll do this again. Thank you, Cheyenne and Patrice.
Thank you.
And Kenyora.
yes.